Hello, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to this video. I'm reviewing Rings of Power Episode 7. My name's Aaron. I'm a composer and somewhat of a Tolkien-phile, or what some have called the purists, or which I'm not, but, you know, that's what I'd be described as by somebody that's kind of just a casual viewer of Tolkien, let's say. So I'm glad you've joined me. Thank you to everybody that's watched so far. I've appreciated it. If you're a new subscriber, thank you very much for subscribing. I'm hoping I'll have some more content for you shortly to keep you entertained. If you're new around here, you understand that I probably am not as outspoken or as loud about things that maybe I don't like about the show or don't feel so strongly about or whatever. I'm honest, but not cruel, let's say. As a person who's worked in film before, I am obviously very cognizant of the fact that I also will be critiqued at some point for some of my work. And so I definitely try to be a moderating force in this discussion. That being said, with this show being somebody that knows a lot about Tolkien and cares a lot about the material, I've written symphonic work inspired by Tolkien for now 8 years. The Silmarillion Symphony is going past 8 years old now. It was about, I want to say, almost 8 years to the day I was going to mastering or about to go to mastering for my first album, which is... if you go back and go through all my work, which is all in the link below, you can subscribe on Spotify as well. Excuse me. You'll be able to see my progression as an artist and as an engineer as well, and the way that the writing's progressed, the way the technology has progressed over 8 years. So all that to say that as I speak about these episodes, I certainly aim to be fair and not cheap. Some of the critiques I've seen out there, and some of them I've appreciated, like any of the folks that really have a legit concern with this thing, or just like, hey, I don't think the writing's good, or whatever their criticism is. Of course, they go on to say multiple different pejoratives in with it or whatever. And so there's no point for me. There's no point to doing that. I think a dispassionate analysis is probably a little bit better, a little bit more fair. And as a creative person, I appreciate that over, oh, this is just junk, or this is just, yeah. Sometimes that is the critique that you need, but you can't just say that over and over again and expect to get a better result. That's just not how that works. In a creative space and with creative people, it's like, this is very dear to people's hearts. Even if you're not a lore purist, I wouldn't say the people making the show are necessarily lore purists, but they know some of the lore for sure. Yeah, so if you're new here and you're looking for a fantastical kind of take or a shock jock kind of take, you're not going to find it. You can go find it somewhere else. I'm not going to do that, but at any rate, let's get into talking about the show. That dropped midnight Eastern on Thursday night. I watched this yesterday. I've only watched it once, so there will be bits of it that I am probably missing, and that's okay, because I'm shooting from the hip and just going from memory. And so just my overall, I'm going to give my overall now. On the show. And one thing that struck me, and this is consistent across the entire series, I will do a series review in a couple of weeks, is that I'm not finding the number of memorable moments per hour, let's say. If you're a sports person, you know, I watch a lot of football, soccer, whatever you want to call it, depending on where you are in the world. But, you know, you look for goal activity per 90 minutes in a game, or 90 minutes played. In hockey, it's goal scored per 60 minutes played, or something like that. Those kind of stats matter in that context. Well, in this show, if I was to apply the same metric, memorable moments per 60 minutes, or 67 minutes, or 69 minutes, whatever it is, it's pretty low. And like a good number would be like 3, 4, maybe 5 things that I went, wow, I really remember that. And that really impacted me in a positive way, right? If I was to go through and watch the show again, I'd probably be able to do a memorable moments per 60 kind of analysis. And I may try that in the future, but generally in this show, there hasn't been a ton that's really stuck out as memorable in the way I'd like it to be. There's been a lot of what I feel is sort of stilted dialogue and interactions between certain characters. And that continued in episode 7. And I felt the main thing I felt about episode 7 actually is that they had a little bit of something, like you had some shock and awe at the end of 6. Again, how believable all of it is that's for a different conversation. But you had some momentum because you had a big battle. People were doing things. Even if some people didn't like the way the battle came off, I was like, I'll take it or leave it. Like I'm kind of in the middle. I'm like, all right, that doesn't really stop me from watching the show, let's say. It wasn't so irritating to me that I'll just never going to watch this again. I'm unsubscribing from all my Amazon. No, it's nothing like that. But I don't feel he sees the momentum of that very well. Whatever was there from the last episode, which what they had best in the last episode was narrative, like coherency. It's like now we have a sort of a direction for at least part of the show. And now we've split back off into like 2 or 3 different things. And that is a function of, the sheer number of characters you have to deal with in a Tolkien universe. So I sympathize with the producers of the show and the writers. I sympathize with that. Do I think it could be better? Yeah. I'm cutting them a break. I mentioned this in my last episode. If you haven't watched it, go ahead and go watch my review for episode 6. Talking about, I wonder what COVID actually did to table reads and just how much people were actually spending time with one another working this stuff out. And I'm like, a lot of it just looks like people aren't even comfortable with each other quite yet. And I don't mean as human beings. It's just like within the character, they're not quite comfortable. Elendil interacting with Isildur or whoever. We didn't have any Elendil and Isildur. Spoiler alert, Isildur saves the queen. And he's missing after this episode, and Elendil is ticked. And that was one of the, we'll call this a memorable bit for me. Not hard to figure this one out. That Elendil was pretty ticked off with Galadriel by the end of it. I didn't quite understand the way they approached that. This is the first bit where I kind of thought what Elendil was doing looked kind of ridiculous. And I don't count the armor that didn't fit very well as part of that. Just the way it was acted, it didn't resonate with me at all. I didn't find it terribly convincing. Although I understand why he was pissed, but it seemed like it came almost out of nowhere. Even though I know your son just might be dead in a burning wasteland at this point. I'm not even going to bother talking about how does Galadriel survive the fiery waste, having stood so close to it, and then they walk further into it is what it looks like, and there's still people alive. It is a fantasy land, but I would say there are rules. So I'm surprised. But of course, she's an elf, so they are stronger than your typical human in Middle-earth. So she somehow pulled it off and got out of this alive and finds Theo, which is fine. They have a little bit of dialogue there. I feel like there was some missed opportunities there. Again, the dialogue, I feel, is a bit trite and it's just not great. It's a lot of trying to sound wise without being convincing in that at all. That's how it's coming off to me, and it's hard. Just a hard. I think it's a hard thing in art in general to try and capture the spirit of what you're on about, as well as getting the words right. And I feel like this is kind of like in general, especially with Galadriel, it's like the character doesn't feel right right now. And they explain some of it. Celeborn is apparently dead. This is a non-canon decision that was made, or it's something else. Maybe he's languishing in a prison somewhere, or he's barely alive somewhere, or we're going to make Gil-galad look really bad in season 2 because he imprisoned Celeborn for some malicious reason or something ridiculous. Again, they've really emaciated Gil-galad's character in this. So I don't know. All bets are off. Maybe Gil-galad comes good in episode 8. Who knows? But trying to, the spirit of this is, we know that in the books that Galadriel is super wise. And in Rings of Power, it's like you can see a little bit of growth. But again, she was pretty much, from where I'm standing and having dealt with the history of Middle-earth a little bit, and obviously Lord of the Rings, Hobbit, appendices, Silmarillion specifically, I would say that they had to take attack for something, and they have to give her a character arc for the show because they have the show, and they have to give her that. But she was pretty much the finished article prior to the Second Age, like still a little bit young, still wanted to have lands of her own at the end of the First Age after the War of Wrath. But I would say she's probably the finished article, given the fact that she spent a lot of time with Thingol and Melian in Doriath, just by virtue of that, and by watching how awful, and this is another thing that's just aggravating me about the character, she has seen firsthand how impetuousness, wrathfulness, vengeance destroys everything, particularly in the character of Fëanor and that of his sons in the First Age. So I think that she's learned the lessons they're showing her learning now. I personally think that she learned them a millennia prior, at least, probably 2. That her radar is up for anything Sauron is not surprising. That it's like this blood oath vengeance thing, I do not buy. That doesn't make sense to me. Excuse me, I'm going to adjust my camera here. There we go. That should be a little bit better. So I'm not buying that. Boy, this is really struggling today. All right. There we go. So I'm really not digging that. But I do understand that there are things that you have to do in a show to make it a show. And so that's the one thing. So again, they're trying to make her sound wise, but the spirit of it doesn't feel that way. And so it's kind of ending up feeling kind of hollow and generic for me. So that's the Galadriel portion of this, and I don't really want to discuss it here until I discuss, which I hope this video will come out in the next week. I haven't had time to work on it yet, but Tolkien and writing women is something very important to me, actually, and it's something much discussed, and one of the aims of this show was to apparently write strong women. So I will discuss that at another time. Because I don't know that they're necessarily living up to that, and they're certainly not living up to the way Tolkien even wrote his female characters, and that's all I'm going to say about it for now. Looking at another character, we have some action with Miriel, who, again, is saved, but some fire gets in her eyes, and we find out that she's blind. Really only Elendil and Valandil, I think that's what his name is. They find out first. Galadriel finds out a little later, and so that's sad. That's cool. She's kind of a cool character. She at least got on her hands and knees and started trying to help people and tried to save some people at the end of the last episode and then at the beginning of this one. So that's a little sad. they write her a little funny at the end, with regard to her relationship to Galadriel and the elves, but we know they're setting back for Numenor, and Elendil can't wait. This is beyond me. Why this dude isn't looking for his son through this whole episode, and then is heaping mad, to keep it family, with Galadriel and the elves by the end of the episode is absolutely beyond me. That decision doesn't make any sense. And I'm talking about just in the show, it doesn't make any sense. Like, I know he's a little frustrated with his son. His son's a screw up. Fair enough. And he's a widower, so he's got some sorrow, right? Okay, fine. What parent behaves like that? Like that so they lost me there. They lost me there. It's like he didn't even try and go look. Like, whatever. All right. So that kind of bombed for me, to be honest. And again, the way he was about the elves and Galadriel and that funny face that he made toward the end of the episode was, it was just, it left me kind of going funny. And the way he handled Muriel going blind was, I thought, this is a missed opportunity. Maybe that could have been written a different way. I would think it could have been, but that's all right. We just move on. We move on. We also have a visit to the Harfoots, which, again, in my last review, I was very honest about the fact that not having the Harfoots around was a real net positive for episode 6. And they're back in this one, and we get to see some stuff that we actually had been waiting to see all season that was in the trailer, with We Stay True to Each Other and whatever else. And Largo, whatever his name is I guess his ankle's working a little bit better because he's challenging the witch people, or the cult people, the Sauron cult people, who I think to this point still haven't spoken a word. So there's that. So I don't even understand really what's going on there right now. They're kind of the only mystique thing. I'm surprised they didn't speak to the hobbits, but there you go. Instead, they just burnt something right in front of them. I thought the stranger healing stuff was kind of cool, but I'm wondering where they're going with that, because again, it's definitely an ode to Gandalf. If it's not Gandalf himself, it is Gandalf. Come on. But really, the Istari do not show up until about 1,000 years into the Third Age. So this guy could be somebody else, and I'd be interested if they were making up a character that fell out of the sky out of whole cloth. I hope they make him a good one. They've just spent almost no time exposing his character, other than the fact that he can speak what sounds like Elvish to me. I presume it's Kenya, but yeah. So I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen there. And of course, we end with a few of the Harfoots going off to look for the stranger because they exiled him 20 minutes earlier for being dangerous, which he was. He also did heal their orchard, so take it for what it's worth. But you have this dynamic here that's setting up between the cult people and the stranger, where the stranger's doing some things and the cult people are doing something quite different. What are they doing? I do not know. Other than going around, and I assume they're looking for Sauron. That would be my guess. Who are they, and what is their purpose? Nobody has explained, and I think I hope it gets explained by the end of episode 8, but I am not holding out a lot of hope. I'll bounce around to the last storyline, which is really the Elrond Duran saga. So they find the Mithril. Disa convinces Duran to go look for it anyway, even though his father, the king, said don't. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, It's fine. Like the dwarves have been one of the things that have kind of saved it a little bit because they definitely look and feel the most Tolkien of the dwarves. I cannot get behind the elves with short hair. All the elven dudes with short hair. I can't. Although it looked like Elrond's hair is starting to get a little bit longer by the end of it, but I could have just been seeing things. But it's time for long hair elves again, folks. We need this. So they're figuring out the mithril thing, and of course, then the king finds out, and he's mad, and he banishes Duran. So we've got this whole "I'm disinheriting you. You don't get anything anymore." Blah blah blah. The dialogue wasn't great, but it got the job done, right? I am getting a little bit tired of all the rock and fire and stone analogies that are in the dialogue there. I know it's the dwarven thing is mining. But surely they have greater literary skills than that. Clearly, Duran knows a little bit of Elvish by the end of this episode, which is nice. And it is heartwarming to see Duran wants to save his friend. So that I think that bit was nice. But that's about all that's there. And then we end, of course, Elrond's being booted out. So it would seem like there's a lot of people going back to a region. Galadriel finds Halbrand finally by the end of this thing. They stumble upon some orcs. The orcs are ready to take their home. Now we officially have Mordor. And it would seem everybody's going to a region. The whole deal is Halbrand is badly wounded, can't be healed, so we need Elvish medicine. Again, repurposing of dialogue from the Fellowship of the Ring, and Two Towers, and I haven't seen much of Return of the King repurposing quite yet, in this episode, let's say. But there's been enough from the movies. It's that bit feels recycled and not very organic, to be quite honest, even though I can see what they're trying to do, and I can credit them for that. But it would seem that Elrond is going back to Lindon, and Galadriel is probably going to the same place because she said she has to face Gil-galad. And she's taking Halbrand with her. Númenóreans are going back to Númenor. And that's about it for the episode. And now we look forward to whatever Adar is going to do, because they stopped on him for a couple of minutes. Still not resolved on what he is, if he's going to be a commander of Sauron's armies, or if he really does hate Sauron, or if he's just lying, who knows. We'll find out. But the orcs now have a homeland. That's nice. Again, I patently disagree with that's just something they want. No, like Sauron wanted to dominate. Like, that's the jam there. But that's, call it a professional disagreement, I suppose. But that's basically where they end up, and now we're stepping into the last episode, which I'm sure is going to be fairly action-packed. I hope there's some urgency to it, because there hasn't been a lot of urgency in the entire thing to date. So, and that's been a net negative for the project, I think. I know they're trying to world build, but there needs to be some urgency going on here to get some plot done, because whatever they had from episode 6, they actually squandered it in episode 7. I'm not trying to be harsh, but it's just like we had some momentum a little bit here, and now we went back to slowly exposing whatever else is going on. So there were some good shots and stuff like that, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's New Zealand, that looks nice. But anyway, thanks very much for watching. I'm going to wrap it up here. Check my links down below if you want to support what I'm doing musically and this channel. And I very much appreciate it. And thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all soon. Thank you.